As we continue to work on this vehicle then, let's actually start to look at the windows, cutting those in and adding in some details there, and perhaps refine the hood and the rear of the vehicle a little bit before moving on. So here's where we're at right now with our vehicle, and next I'm going to work on these window areas. So I've cleaned it up a little bit. If I go into X-ray view, you can see it still needs some work. It's still not quite even as far as the flow, but I feel when I start to get more detail in here around these windows, I'll be able to make some better decisions on how to divide up the mesh further. So what I'm going to do now is start to map out a plan of attack for these windows here by starting a horizontal edge under here, which is the flow of the vehicle under the windows. So let's take a look at a couple of different shots. We want this line coming down here. You can see that it actually splits apart, so it curves up here, but it continues to go right back here to the rear of the trunk. So let's grab our mesh, and we'll go to Edit Poly. And what I think I'll do is, just to keep it consistent with the other parts, we'll hide the command panel there. And we'll do a cut, and we'll go from here probably to here, and I'm going to use the lower one here for the lower horizontal line. So for now I'll just connect up to here, and we'll fix that later. So as always, we need to start taking a look at how these sit in our other views. And you know, it's not actually too bad, but we've got a little bit of a discrepancy here between this line that travels back, and I've currently got it hitting this area here, but I'm wondering if I should bring it back to here. So I'm going to check my reference imagery for that. And see, it comes down here, and this is the further point, and this is the point that follows back here. So what I might do actually is just bear that in mind, and probably make a cut here and extend this out to here, and figure the details out later. I'll do a target weld here, from here to here, and just kind of place this one for now. And then follow that curve down. Try not to be too fiddly at this point. Come back and clean these up later. So the line is fairly good until it gets to about here. And we can bring this up. And I'm going to bring this point out to the corner, the lower corner of that window there. And the blueprints start to get a little fuzzy here. So we'll do the best we can, and then we can always gauge it by eye later on. And probably bring this one up to here. So now we've got a base for these windows. What I need to do is actually draw out the frame here first. So I need to outline the windows, each of the windows. I'll start with the back one and then move on to the front one later on. So let's grab our cut tool again and consider how we're going to do this. So first of all, I really need to realign this. I want this line to match up, make use of this existing geometry. Match that, try and match that angle there, just like we have here. Okay, now I think we're ready to cut. So let's cut up here for the top of the window, and then down here for the lower section. And let's just tweak these down a little bit. Okay, so now I've got a problem here because I've got n-sided polygons. So we should be able to cut this out to here. That gives us 4 and 4. Okay, so that gives us the outer edge. So what we need to do now is actually develop this inner edge. So let's look at the reference material again. Let's try and find an image which gives us a good shot of that rear window. Okay, this is a good one. So you can see that inner portion is actually just the black discoloration of the glass. So we don't really need to form that as geometry. What we do need to form is this little lip around the outside. So it's really going to be a very small adjustment just to give the idea that we've got this edge here. But I also need to get these curves formed around the window. So let's do that next. So bearing in mind that this is going to be relatively low res for the majority of these videos, we'll just do a simple suggestion of curvature here. Maybe we'll come in and add some more detail later. Okay, so we've got some curvature on those windows. Now we need to fix these n-sided polys. So I'll bring those in. I'm not too worried about the insides right now because I'm going to fix that later. And I'll plan to extend these along here to the next window later on as well. So let's do this guy. And, oops, you know what? Should have done that to here. Yeah, we can extend these down. And we'll do the same thing here. Extend this back. And extend this one probably to here. It's not always apparent which is the best approach sometimes. And you know, I think we'd probably be able to just cut here. It's not the best example right now, so let's cut from here to here. That gives us 4 there. And you know, I think what we could do, so we'll just remove this guy out and then recut from here to here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That looks a little bit neater. So we'll fix this monstrosity here later. What I'll do now then is actually grab all of these inner edges Just double check them from the top view. Yes, actually I need to make some adjustments here. So let's do that right now before we get into trouble. Bring those forward so they continue to match the blueprints. Okay, something like this. Yeah, this is one of those situations where it's actually better to make sure you get this right before we do the next step, because otherwise you have to move a lot more vertices to fix these mistakes. Okay, so I'm going to select these faces here, and what I'm going to actually do is a bevel, and we'll do the bevel settings, and probably do this in the 3D view. I think it'll be easier, and switch out of X-ray mode, Alt X, and remember it's just a very small lip, so you can see how we can bring this out, but we can also bevel it in like this. So let's just zoom in on that. We want very small values here, so I'm bringing this down just a tiny bit. This is way too much. So probably something like 0.1, and then let's look at the amount here. 0.13. Got a bit of a mistake there. I'll fix that. So something fairly small. Could probably just go to there. 0.1, 0.1. I think that'd be good. And what I'll do is add another one to this. But this time, I'm going to bring it out. So this is going to be the lip, and this next one is going to be my piece of glass. So I'll bring this forward. Let's try doing 0.1 again. Thinking back to our reference images. Yeah, I think it probably needs to come in more than that. So let's do 0.05. And I think that's good, at least for now, for this level of detail. So you can see how easy that was to create that window. And I do need to come in here though. And let's see. Grab these guys and just clean this up a little bit, because that's looking fairly bad right now. I think our perspective view is going to be the best bet here. We'll just do it by eye and just bring that in, grabbing all of these, trying to even that out. Probably bring these back. And I can continue to tweak that later. But for now, you can see how easy that was to create that window. So next, on to the forward window. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I did with the rear window, again using reference imagery to try and get an idea of how to do this. And we've got a slightly bigger lip on this one, but essentially I'm going to use a very similar process. We'll deal with the mirror later on. For now we're just going to try and get this window shape in. So I'm going to pretend that this isn't here and use exactly the same process. I've created this in the same way then, and if I just come out of X-ray mode, you can see that I actually chose not to do the additional bevel at this time for the glass, just to try and keep it simple. One thing I did notice is that, at least on this reference image, the outer lip here seems to come up and over instead of going in like it does down here. So later on I might decide to come back and tweak that, refine it a little bit. But for now, I think that'll work. And you can see that we've got some cleaning up to do. We have to get rid of these end-sided polygons inside the windows. And we also need to fix these end-sided polygons, these very awkward shapes in between the windows. So I'll use my cut tool here, and again just trying to figure out how to get our quads back. What I can do here is just come from this window over to here, and then probably here to here, and it's not the tidiest, but I think it should work for now. Let's see, what I might later decide to do is take a slightly different approach there, but I think that'll be okay. So those are the side windows. Now we can move on to the front window, and I'll come to my top view. Again, being sure to look at my reference material. This one's kind of similar to the rear window that we had here on the side, in that we just have a very small bevel that we can do just to give it like a hint of that window coming out. So we want to try and get that square shape described here. I'm not using this curved inner shape because that's the discoloration of the glass. So I'll bring this in. Let's try and follow this line down to here. Now this one's good because we only have to do half the work because the symmetry is going to take care of the rest, which is very, very handy. Okay. So one thing I did when I did this side window is I actually added in a couple more loops down. You can see that on the side of the vehicle. I tried to even these out a little bit here, and later on I might add just another one here, try and space this out, because it's still looking a little jagged. And the reason I say that is because you can see we're going to need to add some more down the length of the vehicle as well, but I'm only going to add those when I really need to add them. So for now, simpler is better. So let's try and figure out, let's take a look at a slightly different reference image. Try and figure out what's going on with this lip here. Remember, we're not trying to get it perfectly detailed, at least on this example right now. We can always refine it more later. For the time being though, I just want to try and give the suggestion of this window being here. Okay, so that's a fairly good shape. Let's use our bevel again. Bevel settings. Okay, now this is interesting, because obviously we're only beveling half of this. We're going to get an interesting seam going down here. So this will require some cleanup later on, but that's not too big a deal. So what I might ultimately do is, just looking at my reference imagery here, the glass is set in with that actual lip being a little further out. So let's try and replicate that if we can. Let's use some very small values here. Bring this up just a bit. Oops. I don't want it to look too crazy here, so just going to use some really small values. Let's give that a go for now. We can always tweak it later. We'll add another one with a plus. And this time I'm going to come back in. So we'll bring this, oops, down. And out. To give the idea that there's a little lip coming up with glass set in behind it. Okay. So that's a start, and we'll preserve that. Now we have to fix the problem with the join. So all I'm going to do is grab these inner pieces. In fact, I need to grab these ones too. I'm just going to remove those out. I'll just hit the delete key, and we run into a problem in that the symmetry modifier is actually a little too powerful right now. So let's bring back the command panel here. Come to symmetry, and you can see that I've probably just got this threshold set a little too high. I've been tweaking this as I go. If I lower this down, there we go. So it was just a little too strong, and it was causing those to join together. Whereas here, we can see we've got some issues I need to also clean up. So just be aware that that symmetry modifier can get you into trouble. For now though, that's okay. Let's actually come back to the edit poly, make sure we've got show end result on. Back to our vertices, and we could use the align feature to do this. I'm just going to bring them together until they snap. So just use that symmetry modifier to our advantage. bring these in. If you're having trouble zooming into a certain spot, remember that you've got those shortcut keys. I have mine set to Maya keys, so for me it's F, but normally it's going to be the Z key. Okay, let's fix this guy here, bring this back till those snap. And we'll try and clean up a little bit of this hood as well in this part of the video, where you can see we've got an issue that we haven't got that opening there. So we'll fix that later. But for now, that's a rough front windscreen in place. We can come back here and start working on the rear screen. So again, I'm being sure to use reference material here, and I'll use a similar technique to the front window, except this time I'm going to go in first. So I'll come back after I've completed that. With that rear window complete then, I actually ended up changing my mind a couple of times, because on this particular model what I noticed is that this line that comes back here actually lifts up away from the window, and we end up having this sort of lip that comes up here. And so I had to kind of sit and think about the best way to approach that. So what I ended up doing was I took this line that's traveling down the length of the car, and what I've done, at least for the time being, is I just compressed those very close together here, so they're running down. Initially I had them going into the glass and they formed part of the window, but I decided that that geometry could be maybe put to better use here. So we come down the car, and what I think I'm going to do, if I come to the perspective view, is try and replicate that lip coming up. So I've got that extra little piece of geometry now here, and I can just lift this up and build that lip. So I'll have to create another cut down here, which actually I have left over from when I was initially blocking out the car. So let's bring this over just for now, and we'll clean that up in a bit. Let's bring this up. So it really is interesting how, you know, your creation is going to just evolve as you go, and you're going to keep changing your mind. At least that's how I tend to work. And sometimes the most appropriate solution isn't necessarily immediately apparent. So keep working on it, keep changing your design as you go, and making improvements. And the more you do this, the easier it becomes to make these improvements and to figure out the best way to construct this vehicle. The thing to remember though is to keep it simple. If you start adding in too much detail too early, you can see I only did a single bevel on this rear window. I just don't need additional detail right now. I can always add that in later, but I want to get working across the whole vehicle before I get too interested in the fine details. So about halfway down this window is when this lip starts to lift up. So we'll try and replicate that here. Probably bring this one and this one up just a little bit. Something like that. Let go of that one. So you have to try and plan ahead. And my initial thoughts on this lip were probably not the best ones, you know, probably not the best approach. So just keep changing it, keep evolving it. Okay, I think that'll work for now. Obviously we've got some end-sided polys here, but we'll clean those up later on when we come to do the rear of the vehicle. So that's our windows roughed out. What we'll do now is we'll start to consider what we can do to clean up this hood area. Again, I'm going to refer to some reference imagery and try and figure out exactly how this works. So the windshield comes down here, and you can see we've kind of got the wipers there. We've actually got this ventilation area here. So what I might do, at least just for now, is just remove this section. I'll just lift it up and cut it out, and then we can always come in and add some small details in there later. But for now, it doesn't really make sense to have geometry in this area. So let's plan to do that. Let's take a look at the model and back into X-ray mode. So right now the screen just sort of dips down, and then we've got that horrible leap there. So we're going to need to branch out and create some extra geometry in order to create that lip. So looking at this, I can see I've got a try here. That's actually a perfect situation to come in and create a cut. So let's do that. Let's build a cut here, and we'll cut from here to here. Up to here, which I'm assuming is that top edge. Come back out to the side view and start to lift these into place. Okay, so we need some more geometry at this point to start creating this line down here. And this is where we're running into problems with just not having enough detail down the length of the vehicle. I reckon we can get away with, at least for now, just adding one more swift loop down there. So I'll do that shortly. In the meantime, try and plan how I'm going to cut this out. And I think what I'll do is cut the lower lip of that screen. I don't want the gap to be too big. Then in face mode, just going to delete those out, create that hole. So you might think that's a little drastic right now, but I can always plan to come in and add in that additional geometry later on. In the meantime, what I can do, just checking back at this, is just pull that or extend that screen line down into the vehicle. So we can grab these interior parts. Here. And in the side view, we'll just do something like that, just for now. We'll consider that temporary. And we'll obviously have to clean this up later on. But that gives us that sort of vent effect there on the hood. Okay, so now we need to fix the issue of not enough detail running down the length of the vehicle, and I'll fix that by adding in some swift loops, or a swift loop. Now in a sense I kind of shot myself in the foot by deleting it out so soon, because if I try and use my swift loop tool now, you'll notice that it stops at that cut. So what I'll do temporarily is just grab these two edges here and just bridge them to rejoin that geometry. And now I can do a swift loop. Throw one in there for the time being. And so now is the job of trying to even all this out. So what I'll do now is I'll just spend some time trying to get these a little bit more evenly spaced so we can move on. With that done then, you can see how it's looking a little more even. I just added that single swift loop down there and went ahead and just grabbed groups or clusters of these vertices and just moved them up and down. Then tweaked smaller clusters of them left and right to keep the curvature here. And then once I'd fixed the alignment here and the spacing on the top view, of course being sure to come back to your other views and make sure that that curvature is still good in the other views, because it's easy to accidentally wreck that. So again, I just sort of grabbed clumps of these and moved them up and down. And then the final test is to just check everything in your perspective view. Make sure that it's still looking good enough, at least for the time being. We'll keep refining as we go. So now that I've got that in place, I can come back in and I can remove these interior pieces that I had accidentally deleted and needed in for that swift loop. And I would say that's a start on that hood. I've been very careful to try and match the line of this curvature down here. And then what we'll need to do is bring this front view into play and start looking at the height here and what that needs to be. We'll grab some clusters of these and check this selection, because I'm pretty sure I picked up some that I don't need. And again, this is a question of trying to marry up the different views. So I'm trusting my top view for the accuracy of that line as far as left to right goes, but I'm going to trust the front and side views as far as the height goes. So I'll bring these down and gradually start deselecting. And this front one, that's good enough for now. Ultimately, we definitely need more detail here on this front curvature, so I'll have to start thinking about how to add that in later on. But for now, I think that's a fairly good shape on that hood, so we'll tidy that up when we come to do the front and the lights and the bumper. Let's take a quick look at the rear of the vehicle here. You can see that where I added in that lip, if I come back to my reference image, the lip doesn't actually extend all the way back. It kind of stops about here. So it would probably be a good idea to come in and add a quick swift loop in, roughly where that lip stops. I'm just going to do this by eye. Something like that. And then just bring this down to stop that lip. Something like that. And we can clean that up later on when we come to do the rear of the vehicle. So for now, that's a start on those windows and cleaning up how those merge and hit the hood and the rear of the vehicle. So next we'll start to look at cleaning up the front of this vehicle and adding in some detail around the bumper areas. You may notice that we've got, it's looking quite blurry where we have these cuts in here. This is all to do with the smoothing on the geometry, so don't worry, we're going to come and tackle that later on using smoothing groups. But for now, let's move on to the next video.